Right then, guys. Big. I watched it a couple of nights ago for the first time in years, and growing up for me, it was one of my go-to films. I loved it growing up. It was one of the ones I would watch time and time again, and no doubt. And I can't remember if I had an original copy of it or if it was off TV, but I probably wore it down, next to nothing. I probably had to throw that VHS out after. But Ev, what about yourself? Did you watch it growing
Yeah,
up?
yeah. It was. I think. I think the first time I saw it was probably on TV, and it was probably around Christmas time because it seems to me like one of those sort of mid afternoon Christmas films that they put on the week between Christmas and New Year. Um, yeah, I didn't have it on tape or anything, but yeah, that was for me.
What about you, Prague?
Oh, I definitely watched it growing up. Yeah, I loved this film when I was a kid. Used to watch it all the time, and I think it's probably one of the films I've watched more than any other. If you take the amount of times I've watched it over the span of my lifetime, then Big is probably one of the most watched films for me. Just because if it's on TV, or if someone says, "Oh, do you want to watch this?" then I'm like, "Yeah, I'll watch it." It's one of those films. If you turn the channel and it's like halfway through, I will sit down and watch the rest of it.
And look, me and Prog grew up together, so chances are, we probably watched this over and over together as well, or at least sort of passed around a copy of it and things. But for me, very similar to you, Prog, I watched it growing up time and time again. It was maybe a go-to film. If it was on TV, I'd watch it. If I had a spare couple of hours during the summer holidays, I would watch it. And I was thinking back, and I have quite a vivid memory of watching it before going to school. And I'm not saying I got up at like 5 o'clock in the morning to do that. I think I must have had a dentist appointment or a doctor's appointment early on. And I watched it before going to school. And I remember coming into school then, and maybe first break in the morning. And I was singing the rap song from it. And I got quite a vivid memory of this. And I'm pretty sure, and don't put me on the spot because I'm not going to do it, but I'm pretty sure I could probably recite that word for word now. It's
Well,
Oh,
I remember. I don't know if it was particularly you and me, but I do remember when we were in the playground in junior school, or it might have been comprehensive, singing that song.
maybe it's the time that I'm thinking of as well, and watching it before school and then going in, and yeah, it's brilliant. And
did,
for me, going back to this film, I haven't seen it maybe 10 years, maybe even more, maybe 15 years, and as soon as it came on, I had a smile on my face. It just automatically, and we discussed this on a previous podcast as well, that I just had a huge smile on my face, and because again, it just brought back memories of watching it as a kid.
Yeah, same for me. I don't know when the last time I saw it all the way through is. Like I just mentioned, I've seen it loads of times, but different
yeah.
parts here and there, and obviously turned the channel to find it on, so I've continued watching it. But start to finish, I can't remember the last time I sat down and watched it. But I'm glad that we decided to do this one. When one of you boys said about doing Big, I was like, yeah, I'm definite for that. And like you said, within the first 5 minutes, I'm smiling, and I don't think it left my face. I don't think it left my face until the very last scenes where they have, the Josh has to part ways with Susan for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But even that, I mean, I think that's a sign of how good the film is, because that's a balancing act. He's 13, but they do it in a very good and sweet way. And I was quite emotional when I watched it last night. So
And I did wonder whether it was, again, we often talk about nostalgia goggles, and because we watched it growing up, we've got a connection with that film. But yeah, for me, it held my attention for the majority of the film. Maybe there's one or two scenes where it doesn't. But for me, I remembered every scene. I can sometimes go back to a film, and this is just my memory, but I can sometimes go back to a film and think, I don't remember that bit. And it could be that it wasn't in an original version that I saw. But yeah, every scene in that film I remembered vividly. There were strong parts I could have recited. But yeah, I loved it.
I was going to say, the concern I did have before I watched it yesterday was something we're probably going to speak about a lot as we continue to do films, and that's the fear of the film dating badly. And apart from the actual computer specific elements, the computers they use and the toys that they're trying to come up with in Josh's job, I don't think any of it's dated.
Yeah, and I think for me as well, it's probably testament to the storytelling, but it's also testament to the performance. And Tom Hanks is brilliant in it. And it's probably the film that introduced me to Tom Hanks. And don't get me wrong, I'm familiar with other things that he's done, The Burbs and from that particular era, sorry. But yeah, it introduced me to Tom Hanks, and in my mind then, Tom Hanks is that big kid. And I can't really think of Tom Hanks in my mind without seeing Josh. Maybe I see Forrest Gump as well at times, but I see him playing a 30-year-old Josh.
I think your opinion of Tom Hanks depends on what film you might have seen him in first, isn't it? And certainly if you're going to watch a Tom Hanks film when you're a kid, you're more often than not going to watch either Big or Splash.
Splash, yes.
And you can argue that both the lead characters in those films have similar traits or characteristics, but they're both brilliant roles, well scripted, well written. But I don't know if anyone. I was trying to think last night after watching it if anyone could have done Big in the way Tom Hanks did it.
Right, so I got a couple of points on this. I'll jump in now because there's some facts around who potentially was going to play older Josh. Let's put it that way. And Tom Hanks was always first choice, but at the time he was too busy. So they consider Kevin Costner, Warren Beatty, and Dennis Quaid. All of them said no. John Travolta was really interested in playing it, but the studio didn't want John Travolta. Gary Busey auditioned, but Penny Marshall, the director, didn't want him. And Robert De Niro said yes, but his price tag was £6 million to do the film.
Okay.
Considering it had a budget of 18 million, it's it was a third of the film, so it was highly unlikely.
I'm not saying you couldn't have done the film with some of those actors, because a lot of those actors you listed are very good to excellent. But I don't see the film the same way with those people involved. No. Certainly with someone like Robert De Niro, I don't think he would have had the charm.
No, I think his seriousness would have come through and his intense. How could he play a 30-year-old with a 13-year-old head? Yeah. I don't get it either. I think that was more of a case of Robert De Niro wanted to do it to show that his acting sort of spectrum.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know.
Well, I mean, you try and think of someone now trying to do that role. I mean, there's so many body swap films out there, and they're all been.
Well, again, another interesting point. At that particular time, what year was this? 88. 88. There was loads of those films out, and again, looking up at the film, there's an interesting fact that there was 5 body swap films out that particular year. And you're talking vice versa?
Vice versa.
Vice versa. Sorry, yeah. I loved that film growing up. That's with Judge Reinhardt, is it?
Yeah, and the kid from the Wonder Years.
But yeah, there was quite a few of those type of films out, and yeah, for me, I would always go back to Big, and
I'm not saying the success of Big is solely on Tom Hanks's shoulders. I'm sure we'll get into a few other aspects, but I do think the charm of the film lies with him.
Yeah.
And I don't want to disregard the screenplay. I think the screenplay is excellent, and obviously the directing by Penny Marshall. She certainly brings a warmth to the film, but I don't think we can understand. I don't think it's ever been understated how important Tom Hanks is to Big, is it?
Yeah, and I'm not saying that sort of kick-started his career, because he was being lined up for a number of leading roles then, but in my mind, it's my introduction to Tom Hanks, as I said earlier. So.
I think it was the platform for Tom Hanks to show that he can be this not A-list celebrity but A-list actor.
Yeah, no, definitely. Interestingly as well, so Anne Spielberg, who is the sister of Steven Spielberg, obviously, she wrote the script with Gary Ross, and they had Harrison Ford and Steven Spielberg in mind for the lead role and director.
Okay.
And again, Harrison Ford is a lead as 30-year-old Josh. No. I can't really see it.
No.
But I think at the time, they weren't thinking comedy as such, and it's not really a comedy. I'm using that word loosely there, but I think it would have been a lot more of a serious film with Harrison Ford in mind.
Oh yeah, I mean, like you said, with a lot of the actors you mentioned before, and now Harrison Ford, there's too many rough edges with those guys. Unfortunately, I mean that could be just because we've not seen him in that type of role, so we wouldn't associate him with them. But trying to think whether they could play that part it doesn't sit with me.
No, definitely not. So moving on to favourite aspect of the film. Ev, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I think I was thinking about this earlier, and I think for me, it teaches you not to take life too seriously, because I think like it's when he gets his first job, like on the computers and whatever, and gets his paycheck of like, wow, $176, and he's loving the fact that he's getting that much money, but the guy next to him's like, pathetic.
I gotta say,
or whatever his name is.
Ev, you love a theme, don't you?
Well, I'll try.
But most of the time, me and Andrew are picking out an actor or director or screenplay or something like that. You're always going for the deep cut, aren't you?
Well,
he's looking for life's,
life lessons.
Yeah.
Life lessons with Evan Quick.
Oh, that sounds like a 10 in the morning show on BBC One. Right, like before Homes Under the Hammer and after breakfast news or whatever.
The light-hearted slot.
I know, yeah. don't get done, get Ev. It's just because he goes through the film when he's an adult, just sort of riding the wave, so to speak. Loving life, even though he's got it's a fortune to him, but it's like a pittance to everyone else. And then how he gets promoted, where he's just playing the keyboard and stuff like that. And then it's when he's in the board meeting, for example, and he said, "Oh, the building should turn into a robot," and he's doing all that with a thing and stuff. I just think it's
I don't get it.
Yeah.
It's brilliant.
The way he puts his hand up as well, he's like,
yeah,
really, really tentative about doing it.
Frog, what about you? Favorite aspect?
It's Tom Hanks. There's nothing comes close to him. I mean, there's loads of good stuff in the film, and I can talk about someone else if you want me to, but I knew going into it what my best aspect of the film was going to be, and nothing changed my mind about it when I was watching it. Tom Hanks is he's absolute gold. And I just want to highlight one thing. He was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Actor, but he lost in 1989 he lost in 1988 to Dustin Hoffman for Rain Man. And I would argue, seriously argue, that Tom Hanks should have won it.
This is a hot take.
Dustin Hoffman's amazing, and Rain Man's a really good film. But I know which film I'd rather watch, and I know which performance I prefer. And that's Tom Hanks.
Well, I'm sort of with you on that, but maybe I'm quite biased. And my favorite aspect as well is Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
But specifically Tom Hanks's mannerisms, because he is an adult who has to play a child. And I don't think that should be underestimated or understated, because he does it so well. And funnily enough, I looked up at this then, some of his preparation from it, and him, where Penny Marshall got him and younger Josh, and I can't remember the guy's name, sorry, but they just gone to spend time together.
Yeah.
And Tom Hanks said to younger Josh, it's not a case of you learning my mannerisms, because they wanted them to be the same sort of person. It was a case of him.
His name's David Moscow. Sorry, but
David Moscow. It was a case of Tom Hanks said, right, I will learn your mannerisms, and I will look at how you do things. And they just, it was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. That mannerism delivery is spot on.
It's something that Tom Hanks took into Forrest Gump.
Yeah, he spent time with the kid, didn't he?
Yeah.
Right.
The kid who played Forrest Gump, Tom Hanks spent time with him and learned his mannerisms and vocal delivery, and that's why he plays Forrest Gump that way.
Well, it makes perfect sense. I'm pretty sure at the time, if someone had suggested it to maybe another actor, they might not have taken that on. But yeah, for me, I think that the young boy who plays Josh is very good as well. And you don't see him very much in the film, but he is brilliant. And I will just do a side note of another aspect I like of the film, and that's Billy. Josh's friend. I think he's a cracking take on on that character.
Jared Rushton.
Yeah. And again, because the director knew that they would be spending so much screen time together, she got them to spend a lot of time before shooting as well. And that scene where they're on the floor of the motel or the hotel, wherever they stay in, and they're shooting silly string at each other, that wasn't scripted. That came from them spending time together.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so again, just those little details, I think, really help the film.
Well, it's not you don't see it really, but there's a quick scene when he first gets to New York, and they're trying to find the Voltar machine, and Josh and Billy run across the road, and the way Tom Hanks runs across the road, it's exactly like his arms are flailing a little bit because he's trying to avoid the car that's coming. And there's obviously, we've mentioned the way he puts his hand up in the board meeting about the toy robot. And another thing that I laughed at, that I didn't laugh at previous times I watched it, was, do you know when he gets his first wage and he shouts out loud how much his wage is? And that was another way I thought he's shouting like a kid would when they realise they've been given over $100. Like, so excited that he's got this much money. So yeah, going back on what you said about the mannerisms and little characteristic and details that he picks up, that he uses.
That's brilliant. What about favourite scene then? Anyone want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go. I think, well, I'll say the keyboard one, just because I always wanted to do it when I was a kid, and it wasn't just the keyboard thing, but how he's the thing that got me really jealous was the fact he's playing like Quasar laser tag in the shop. I always wanted to do it. Or, you know, even
Which
when
does
Quasar came out.
which does bring me to one thing about the film, which I probably loved growing up. He has a job which he plays with toys all day, and then he develops toys.
Yeah.
And as a kid, I was like, "Oh, there's jobs that you can do that," and yeah, him being in the shop is another perfect example of me as a, I don't know, a 9, 10-year-old kid thinking, "Oh, this is amazing. I want to do that when I'm older."
I love that scene as well. I mean, that is the scene that is most known for that in that film, isn't it? And it's for a reason, really.
And funny enough, that
iconic.
That piano was made for the film, because they did those type of pianos previously, but they were never that big, so they ended up doing like an extra octave on it or something along those lines, in order for both of them to be on there and dancing it. And who's the guy who plays the older the CEO? Is it Robert?
Robert Loggia.
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 Him and Tom Hanks, they went away and they really practiced the dancing. I think they did it separately, and then they came back. Or then they came to the day of filming, and they noticed there was professional dancers there, and supposedly they were like, no, they're not going to be needed. Tell them to go."
Yeah. And
they got it in a hardly any takes.
Oh. So you can see there's a bit of like dance movements when the CEO he's going. There's a shot of him going down the keyboard and he's giving it the full Strictly arms, like going. Yeah.
No, it's a cracking scene. It is a cracking scene. Prog, do you want to go next, or shall I?
Oh, you can go, mate. Yeah.
So my favorite scene is, and I can only describe it as the white tuxedo scene. And I'm going to be a bit naughty here, in the sense of I'm going to merge it into the next scene as well, and I'll explain why. So the white suit scene is the peak of the film for me, where you see a 13-year-old boy in an adult setting. So he is, yes, he looks an adult, but it's the first time I think you properly see him vulnerable to the outside world, and he is an alien to that world around him. So things like, when he turns up in a white tuxedo and everyone else is in black tie, the way that he eats the sweet corn, if you remember that, so he gets a little tiny sweet corn and he starts eating it as if it was a big sweet corn.
Oh, I was going to say, his buffet etiquette is disgraceful.
Well, especially when he gets like the caviar thing, he's just like,
and he just spits it out on the floor. But when he's like picking stuff and he's just throwing them away, you can actually see there's a couple of extras in the background, and they're watching him. And fair play to the extras, they're reacting really well to what he's doing. They're looking on in disgust at some of the stuff that he's doing.
Yeah, if you'd asked me before I watched this film again, I wouldn't have said that scene at all. But watching it as an adult, I think it just made me appreciate what they were trying to achieve from the story. And like I said, to me, that was the peak of him being a child in an adult's body. And then beyond that, two things change in the film for me. One of them, I think he becomes less of a child and he becomes more adult-like. So all of a sudden you see him working on a computer in whatever house or apartment he's in. And the second point is the change of Susan. So before that point, you see Susan in quite professional business attire. And so I'm talking shoulder pads, hard sort of lines on the suit that she's wearing. And this is where I was saying I was a bit cheeky because I'm picking the next scene as well. The next scene is the limo scene. And that is the change for Susan. All of a sudden, he starts opening her eyes in that the world doesn't have to be so cutthroat. It doesn't have to be so professional and strict. And I think then you get the softening of that character.
Well, it goes hand in hand, doesn't it? The more adult he becomes, the more childlike she becomes. So they sort of rub off on each other.
Yeah. But yeah, I love it. You know, the limo scene where he's just flicking buttons off and on, and she's trying to speak to him about and you know why she's doing it. You can tell by what's been said previously about her character that she is the person that, you know, rubs up with the flavor of the month. Whoever is in the old man's flavor of the month, as I think as they put it in the film.
Yeah.
She is the one who gets close to them, and John Hurt's character, Paul, I think his name is. He makes note of that, and he lists all these people that she has supposedly slept with, and you know, she doesn't like that at all. But I think that is the point where, yeah, you definitely see a change in her as a character.
And I think it's left to you as well to decide whether she's with Josh for professional reasons or personal reasons. And obviously, at the end of the film, you get it. Yeah. She's with him because she cares about him. So,
and yeah, I read it as she starts with him as a way to get closer to the old man.
Yeah.
But yeah, that everything softens as the film goes on. And the one thing I didn't really get was her relationship with Paul. You know, John Hurt's character. You know, are they together? And
I think they sleep. I think it's like they just sleep in together. I didn't take it as a serious thing. The thing is, the dynamics in America are or were different to the dynamics in the UK, because I've watched several films from the 80s now, and the amount of times someone's sleeping with someone else, but they've got a key to the other person's apartment, but they're not living there, and they just let themselves in. Yeah. But then they're not seen as serious. Whereas if in the UK, if you give someone a key, they're moving in.
Yeah. So, Prog, what's your favorite scene?
Well, mine's the Schwartz toy store, definitely. But I'm happy to. I've got a couple of scenes written down, so I'm happy to pick one of the others.
Go on, pick another one.
I'm gonna pick the first time he calls his mother when he's working in his booth, and he calls her. And it's obviously he just wants to hear her voice, and he wants to tell her that he's okay, but he can't say he's okay, so he has to say Josh is okay. Yeah. And I like that. See, I really like that scene because it cut a very fine line between heartbreaking and funny. So it's funny for us because we know what's going on. It's a comedy film. We understand the dynamic of him turning into a 30-year-old, this, that, and the other. But it's heartbreaking for the mother. So you feel for her because she hasn't got a clue what's going on with her boy. He's just disappeared. And I thought it encapsulated the film quite well. Like all the way through, there's this balancing act that the film has got to play with this boy he's 13. He's disappeared. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's not mature, but he's got to pretend to be this adult and make his way until he can try and figure out, for want of a better word, get back to being a kid again.
So, if you don't mind, I'll jump into our next topic is what we would normally change. And I really struggled at this point, right, to think of something that I would want to change with the film. But as an adult watching it, and someone who's got kids, I was wondering, I'm not saying I definitely would do this, is whether you would want to see more of the mum. And the problem I have is, I think if you saw more of the mum, it changes the film. It's not a comedy anymore. So I love the scene with her on the walkie-talkie to Billy, right?
Yeah.
Because it's apart from that, and when he phones his mum, you see very little of that side of the film. You see very little of the mum's heartache and the tragedy that she's going through. So, yeah, I'm at a crossroads here, which I don't know whether I want to change it or not, because I know by changing it changes the film, if that makes sense.
I completely get where you're coming from. You're looking at it from a parental aspect, but you can't, for a film like this, you can't do that because it would change the tone of the film.
And isn't it funny though? Because in theory, it's a really dark subject.
Yeah.
She generally thinks her son has been kidnapped, and she doesn't know if he's alive. She hasn't been able to speak to him.
You almost forget about it, don't you? It's just basically like, as soon as he goes off to the big city, it's like you forget about the mother, and it's just like.
Yeah, no,
but
exactly.
I think that's why she's just dropped in here and there, just to remind you.
And they do need that, right? Otherwise, the ending wouldn't have meant anything. He would have just been this kid going home.
Yeah.
But what you see is a young kid going back home, and I think you sort of feel a little bit of a relief for the parents as well.
Yeah, I mean, but again, it's going back to what we've mentioned a few times, or certainly what I've said, is the balancing act.
Yeah.
So many films have this balancing act to play, and this is one of those films that does it perfectly. Like you said, if you have more of them, or like you've thought about, if you have more of the mother, it takes away from the comedic tone and aspects of the film. If you don't show her at all, you're not going to care that much about where he ends up.
And it's and I don't know if that's the director coming through as well, and she's just played it, spot on.
Well, it's only three times that she's mentioned after he goes off to the city. It's only three times, isn't it? That is the phone call where he's working on the PC. He writes a letter.
There's another phone call as well. He rings her pretending to be a survey.
Is that a deleted scene?
It might be.
Yeah, I think that must be deleted. I don't remember that one.
I don't think I've ever seen that one.
Yeah, he rings her because of all the food he's eaten with Billy in that one scene. He rings her because he's got an upset stomach. So he rings her pretending to be a survey, asking what you would give a child for an upset stomach.
Oh,
it's quite a sweet scene, but again, goes back to what you were saying about if you put too much of it in.
Yeah. But like I said, apart from that one, there's only three times the phone call, the letter, the Huey Lewis montage, and the walkie-talkie scene that you said there.
While we're talking about music, right? I thought the score of the film was brilliant, but I couldn't tell you any of the music. I couldn't hum it. I couldn't tell you any songs. I know you just said Huey Lewis, but the music adds to the tone, especially sort of like the end scene when he's going home, and just those things where they just make it a little bit more. I want to say the word whimsical, but it's the wrong word to use.
Yeah.
But I there was one of my notes, and it was one of the things I wanted to discuss. That I thought the sound of the film was very, very good.
Well, it's an accompaniment, isn't it?
Yeah,
it helps the film rather than being its own thing.
Yeah, and it's not like it's got a, we did Karate Kid recently, and you think of Karate Kid, you think of oh my God, what's the song in Karate Kid?
You're the best.
You're the best. Sorry, yeah. You some films you associate songs with. This one you don't. I just remember feeling again quite warm, and it might have been my nostalgia goggles on. So. Prog or Ev, go on. What would you change?
I don't know if I'd change anything, to be honest. I mean, I'm sort of your opinion. Like you said, if you include more of the subject matter about the parental loss sort of thing, it's you change the film's dynamic completely. So I don't know. I think it's
okay to say nothing, Ev.
Right, nothing. Nothing.
No comments.
I would argue this is as close to perfect as a film can get, given the genre it's in.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough.
The balancing act. I'm going to keep harping on about it. I don't know how long this podcast's going to be, but this is going to be my phrase, the balancing act.
So
There's only one nitpick I got with the film, and it's really, really minor. And that's the girl that Josh fancies in the beginning, Cynthia. The date that she's on a date with this guy, and she says he's got a driving license. Now, as far as I was aware, 16 in the US, wasn't it? But she's 13. That's a little bit for
she's
me.
quite tall though, isn't she? So maybe she's like a year older than him, and then the guy's got a couple of years on her or something.
Yeah, that's fair enough. All my argument would be just don't put the driving thing in.
Yeah.
Just say, oh, I'm here with so and so. He turns up and he's like a foot taller than Josh. You get the idea. He's
a jock or something, you know.
Yeah.
Typical sort of.
But that it's just a minor nitpick. It's not a big thing, like, you know.
So there's no aspect that you would change from the film.
I don't think you can.
Yeah, no.
I don't think you can. Don't you know? Some people would disagree, and they might come up with a few things. But I was trying to think of things. Like I was trying to think maybe the Susan character or the Paul Davenport character that John Hurd plays. But they are what they are because they're needed for that.
Yeah.
For the film. And like Susan, I think Elizabeth Perkins is brilliant in the film. She plays that character so well.
Yeah. For me, it's the transition as well. She could have just played the character exactly the same throughout. But there is a transition in the character, which is great. All right, let's sort of think about wrapping it up here. But Ev, would you recommend the film to someone today?
Yes and no, because I think it wouldn't. I don't know if it would hold up, because I think people would just find it a bit dated.
Interesting.
No, it's look, it's like a dagger through his heart. Look at that face. No, I would recommend it because I love the film, but it's just I don't know. It's like I liken it to the Jumanji remake, how they've remade it in like a computer game, whereas obviously the original was a board game and stuff like that. If they were going to remake it for, like, you know, today's audience or whatever, would they really put the Zoltar machine in or something like that, or would it be something else? Would they fit?
I get what you're saying. I mean, they have remade it. They remake this film every bloody year, it seems like, don't they? They just give it a different title. But I would recommend it. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. I can't wait until my kids are old enough to, you know, understand the film and appreciate it. Because I'll happily watch this every Sunday afternoon with them.
Oh, yeah. If I had kids, or if I were to have kids, this is one of those films I would mark down, and it'd be like, right, once they get to about 8 or 9, this is being unveiled.
It's the reason I had kids.
Go on several films. Yeah. I got a further topic for you.
Yeah.
Bonus topic. I came up with 2 sequels to Big.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So the first one, Susan. She goes to the Zoltar machine and she asks to be 13 again. And she meets up with Josh, and it's a budding teen romance. Light-hearted comedy, right?
Well, funnily enough, there was a rumor going around for years that was an alternate ending. But it's a false
Okay.
you know, it's a false rumor.
The second one is a little bit darker. Susan is bereft, love-stricken. She becomes an alcoholic stalker and lusts after a 13-year-old Josh. I'll let you decide which one you'd rather see.
I don't think that's a kid's film anymore, though, is it?
Yeah.
No, that's definitely not something 20th Century Fox would want to release.
All right. On that note, let's leave the listeners with that thought. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. We're aiming to get podcasts out every week. So check out our back catalogue. And yeah, get in touch if you've got any feedback. If there's any films you want us to do, that'd be great. Cheers all.